She's older than me? How is that possible?
She's, got a great skincare regimen.
Good Lord. Well, and I think honestly, part of it is just her peppy attitude. Alrighty. Welcome to American Gods Cast. I'm Taylor Trask.
And I'm Todd A.
And we're back again. It is week 4 in the American Gods TV series rollout. And let's see, we're recording this on a Monday. I saw it early Sunday morning. When did you see the last?
Same here. Yeah, Sunday morning, yeah.
Sunday morning. And I think I saw it and texted IM'd you that.
And then I live texted you as I watched it.
Yeah, which is kind of funny. But I'm like, I remember watching it and then going, oh, no, I'm sorry. I watched it Saturday night. I'm losing my mind.
Oh, okay.
I watched it because it can't. So for those of you who don't know, Starz puts it out at midnight Eastern on all their digital services. So at 10 Mountain on Saturday night, it's around. So I popped it in, and just, about 10 minutes into the thing, I just thought, oh no. And I say that because we've talked in past episodes about the fact that this, they should be honestly doing the entire book over the course of the season. They could easily do it. And instead it feels like they're taking the book and they're going to do 5 seasons out of the book. And I think what really hit me on Saturday night was that is true. And they're going to like do entire episodes over, 5 to 10 pages and just stretch them out as long as they possibly can. And we ain't never getting to House on the Rock at this point. Like that was just my visceral reaction to it. So I might have spoiled it a little bit for you in terms of just like my attitude about it. But I hit you up Sunday morning going, hey, just be prepared. This kind of just is one thing the whole way through. And yeah, so.
Well, there's so many places I could start to ask you a question about that, but do you think it's just like you and I had a lot of conversations about, how a creative, a piece of your original creativity is just, adapted, or I don't know how they make all those decisions towards something's adaptation or just publishing it or putting it out there. Mm. What do you think it is that I don't know that you and I ever had a conversation where we said we assume off air where we just I don't know that you convinced me that the whole book would be in first season. I think we both just mutually agreed that would make the most sense to do. And I guess that's where I'm trying to dig in here because so I watched it and was texting you as I was watching it, like, what the, it's all a flashback. What's going on? Yeah. And then during the episode, I was on Twitter, like just watching the hashtag, and I found so many people, book readers especially, who loved it. And so you are almost, in my in my like vision of all this, you are like the sole book reader who is
whose belief is starting to fail as it so what well before that, like, let's real quick, you made that is a great point you made in our kind of text back and forth. You said something along the lines of, I think American Gods is like a metaphor as a show. It's like a metaphor on the it's
its own experiment in belief.
Its own experiment. There we go. Yeah. So it's like, believing in the show, being a fan of the show means you believe in the show without question. And my belief has been shaken, it would seem, in the last week or two.
But I think so. That's where I think it's real interesting is that part of that is you definitely went in with the expectation of this would probably be best if they just adapt the book for one season. Then they take the Anansi boys and just sort of expand the universe on their own after that one season. But like you've said, I think by episode 4, it's pretty clear they're not going to get the book done.
I mean, we're not even close to a third of the way through yet. Like,
and see, I hear the sort of dread in your voice there. And I literally saw these tweets this weekend where people were saying it with excitement.
Oh, God.
You're saying it with dread that they won't finish the book or get far enough along in the book. These people were saying it with excitement and dread in the opposite way of like, oh no, there's only 4 episodes left. Like, I love this show so much, and I'm going like, as a viewer, again, another episode has happened where I honestly cared a little bit more by the end of the episode, but to sit through 50 minutes of the episode before I really cared about anything was just difficult to do.
Well, and on top of that, the story as it is has not progressed for 2 weeks now. Well, the story is stuck. They're stuck they left Chernobog's apartment and they haven't done, I mean, they've barely done anything. Like, we've gotten character motifs all over the place.
Yeah, it's all just,
you know, some of the characters are related to the main story. Some have nothing to do with it. So, you know, take that what you will. You know, and like we talked about last week, like Mad Sweeney's little moment last week was actually really a good one. It's like, Mad Sweeney's is very sort of integral to the plot, and we need to see more about what he's up to, because when we, you know, it'll make sense later on. But we're seeing, you know, stuff about other characters who really don't have anything to do with this until the very, very end of the entire story. We're seeing like, and in the book, like they gave you little flashbacks of Laura and Shadow, but not all one story dump. It was like, you know, it was sprinkled throughout, like, oh, Shadow remembered the time that blah, blah, blah. You know, he met her out at the casino. And so you got little, you know, taste of it here and there, which I would much rather have had than just one gigantic Laura, you know, origin story. And one that oddly, by the way, backfills like some of the questions you had, like, how did Shadow get cut down from the noose? Some of that I didn't want to, I played along a little bit because I knew sort of where that was headed, but, you know, I didn't want to suggest that we'd get the answer, you know, this way, because I didn't know. But like, it's just, it sort of backfilled that stuff in a way that to me I just wasn't satisfied by that. And then like, again, we're now literally Wednesday and Shadow are still at that goddamn motel. They haven't gone anywhere. Like, what is happening? What the story needs to move, and it's not moving, you know?
Which brings us back to that central question I had last week, which is, what the hell is American Gods about? What's going on? Sorry, I guess I phrased it wrong last week. I said, what is it about? And you gave me a good explanation of what it's about. But what is the story, I think, is maybe different. And here I am on episode 4, and I still don't know what the story is. And I don't, you know, on one hand, that's obviously a criticism that comes from something like Game of Thrones, where there's like a big motivator right in the, you know, first episode. But, you know, if I had watched Mad Men season 1, episode 1, when it aired, I don't know that I would have, you know, quote, known where the story was going.
Yeah, that was an interesting comparison, because you're right. We do have now these living examples. Like, you cannot put Game of Thrones and American Gods side by side.
It's clear now you cannot,
by any stretch. Like, you know, just not even for like, you know, the tone, you know, like the genre, obviously, but like things like structure, the way they can, you know, Game of Thrones, like, will take, you know, in a single episode, you might go to 6 different locations with, you know, 100 different characters, and you may only get like one thing. So they have to make that one thing really work, because you may not see those characters again until 2 weeks later. American Gods are like, we're only dealing with 3 or 4 main characters, and they're together most of the time. So it's like, why can't this thing just move ahead? You know, sorry, I'm sounding exacerbated and just repeating myself, but it's like, the more I say it, the more I'm like, it's just as baffling the 100th time that I say it.
In the course of our American Gods chats, I have unrelatedly watched a couple of, I don't know what I did. I went down the rabbit hole of like watching people explain American Psycho, the movie. And in the course of that, somebody quoted Bret Easton Ellis as saying something like, there's nothing, the ending is very difficult and some of the other scenes in American Psycho are really difficult because film is not, what did he call it? My brain seriously just crapped out on me.
Well, let me jump in while you gather your thoughts.
Jump in. I'll think of it.
It's to me the same thing as, you know, like every American Gods fan who's loving it right now. I want to ask them, were you loving it when Peter Jackson took The Hobbit, a single children's book, and made 3 goddamn movies out of it? Like, was that all justified? Because if they say yes, then clearly we're just on 2 different wavelengths about what we want out of story and what we want out of visual fiction. And so it's like that would be actually fine. It's like, well, we're not going to relate, so there's no point in parsing this out. But if they were to say, oh no, The Hobbit should have been one movie, two at the most, then I'm going to have a real problem, because I'm going to say, well, hey, the same principle applies to American Gods. In fact, even more so, because the book, and I was going back and after this recent episode 4, which we just finished, I actually went back and skimmed through the book a little bit, like physically opened it up, skimmed through it just to make sure I wasn't crazy. And there is actually a nice little pacing, especially in the beginning. Like, again, I use House on the Rock as kind of like the flag in the sand, because that is such a crucial pivot point that you need, like, the story leading up to there needs to be interesting and move along enough to where you feel like we're headed somewhere, and where we're headed is House on the Rock. And then after that moment, everything pivots and you're almost like in a totally different world in the book, which may be why they're like, well, that will just be a season. It's like, no. That's like your first 3 episodes. Like, if you think about like an episode arc, like a seasonal arc, that would have made way more sense. But there is a deliberate sort of momentum to the story in the physical book that just the show has just ignored entirely. And I feel like that's not, even though Neil Gaiman is consulting on it, he's written, he's very much part of the team. It feels like they're almost not honoring the book when they do that. Does that make sense?
Yeah. First of all, I remember the stupid word that I'd forgotten, which is Bret Easton Ellis said, film is not an ambiguous medium. Like if you show a closet where there's, no bloody clothes in it, even though you watched him hang up bloody clothes the other night, your brain is immediately going to go, what the hell is going on? Like, what part of this was a lie? Yeah. And American Gods is having that problem for me over and over. Because it is filmed, whereas like I'm sure the novel can sort of tread in that ambiguity and get a lot of
great comparison.
So sorry to peel off there, but boy,
right?
It's just hard to collect my thoughts on it. Like one thing we've talked about with Game of Thrones over and over and over. I'm so sorry to bring this up, is that I, as a book reader, am generally okay when they make changes to expedite things.
Yes.
And I also appreciate that, like, in our current, we are stupid with great television in this era. And I like television shows that are going somewhere.
Yeah.
Like, unless it's a sitcom or something, if it's a drama, I like that it's telling an overarching story. I don't want, I hate when they cancel a show before it gets to, end the story, Harry and Christine should have gotten married in Night Court. Come on, guys.
Excellent poll.
What happened to Tiffany Thiessen in Fastlane? Did she still addicted to heroin? I don't know. They canceled that show too soon. But let's go back to another show we always mention, Lost. Like,
I was totally
that
going
over and over, and we thought the thing that's going to make this satisfying is when they explain it all in the end. On the other hand, a show I did not watch, Sopranos, left with a very ambiguous ending, as I understand it. But it seemed like even that kind of satisfied people. Like, whichever way you want to go from that ending.
Wait, let's go back to Lost. Lost is a perfect lesson here, because Lost is almost 2 different shows, right? It is the first, I'll just say 3 seasons. I mean, really the first 2 were a show that didn't know what it was, where it was going, or how long it had. So it just kind of it did what American Gods is doing, in that it focused on just like these character motifs and didn't really like pay much towards like the greater mysteries on the island, like any of that stuff. Like, there was the hatch and that stuff, but there wasn't, I made, hints of the others, but there wasn't the, Jacob and all that other stuff. Never, the Dharma Initiative in its true form. None of that was really there. Right. After about midway to the end of season 3 was when they went to see ABC and said, hey, we need to stop after is it 5 or 6? After 6. Like, that's how many we're going to have. ABC's like, wow, that's unprecedented, but okay. And then from that point on, they wrote against that deadline. So everything from like the end of season 3 onwards is up until maybe season 6 is, it almost like shifts into a different gear entirely, right? It's like focused. It's like it's telling character motifs, but it's also like every one of those moves us ahead or focuses on a character that moves us ahead, right? It takes us to the next thing. And I feel like there's two different versions of Lost that coexist. So there's two different kinds of Lost fans. They're the kind who like, and I'll just cut it off at like mid-season 3. Like seasons 1, 2, and about to the middle, the end of 3, Lost was driven less by story and more by character. Every episode is a character motif or two, and they were much more focused on showing you who all these people are and how they, what their past are like and how they relate to each other. And very, there was the hatch and some little things like that with the others, but there wasn't like a broader story about the island that's being told, or about their circumstances or any of that stuff. Like Jacob wasn't even a thing. Then about, the end of, I would say the finale of season 3 onward, everything changed because ABC and the, Lindelof and Cruz basically had a meeting where they said, hey, we want to end this after 6 seasons. And ABC goes, oh, we've never done that before. So I guess, the British model, essentially, like they intentionally wanted to end it. I mean, or the Netflix model too, like just intentional TV, let's just call it. And once they made that decision, everything after that, it's almost like they shifted into a different gear. Like everything was based around the larger story of the island. Like, why are they there? Where are they going? Like, who's keeping them there? Like all this different stuff. It became exciting. They still did the character motifs. They did all that, but it was definitely, there was a momentum to it that there was clearly not there in seasons 1 and 2. And again, part of 3. What I have come to find is that there are fans who like either one or the other, but not both. Like I have a bunch of friends who love the hell out of Lost its first 2 years and then just sort of got bored with it. I didn't really care for it until about the end of season 3. And so it's like once in a great while you'll find somebody who's a fan of both, but it's either one or the other. And I feel like that goes back to our comparison to Game of Thrones. Like Game of Thrones is like latter seasons Lost, and American Gods is like the first 2 seasons, where it's much more focused on showing you who these people are and what their relationships are and how they deal with each other and all that kind of stuff. Whereas obviously Game of Thrones is story, moving forward, moving towards an end goal.
Right.
And you could argue, well, Game of Thrones was like that at the beginning. I'm like, yeah, but no. Like there was stuff happening. We're meeting everybody, but there was we were driving towards a narrative of some kind. You felt it. Like you felt a greater sense of like something evolving as we go.
Well, and I think Lost is such a great like pivot point for all that too, because it was the end of sort of the network television era as we knew it when we were growing up. And even as a viewer, so I didn't watch Lost all the way through. I started watching in season 2 and then had that thing where like when the DVD came out of season 1, I had friends loan me the box so I could catch up and then I just didn't really watch it. Mm-hmm. But even then I was like cognizant that what I wanted was that this was a mystery that they were going to solve. Mm-hmm. I was like, I wanted to think this is something they've already figured out beforehand. Mm-hmm. And they're telling it to us like it's a multi-season mystery, Mm-hmm. I didn't want it to just be like weird shit that happens every week. And Game of Thrones had canon to draw on. Like there was a story to tell. And what I've said over and over again is that I think it succeeded so quickly because it let all the readers know we're telling that story you read. Mm-hmm. And so I guess what's interesting about American Gods is there's definitely a crowd, at least I've seen, on Twitter, of readers who appreciate seeing all these new dimensions to the characters. But for me, as just a viewer, I kind of feel like, well, the story's already been told. We're halfway through the season. I don't know what the story is. Mm-hmm. Why would I keep watching this?
Yeah.
Like in episode 1, like we talked about several ways to solve this last week. And it's not that we're trying to rewrite this, or whatever. But we're just spitballing stuff. Like if Mr. Wednesday in episode 1, like, first of all, he could have just been, in a serious tone to Shadow said, yeah, I'm Odin, like the Norse god, come to America. He could have said that in a way where it's played off like Shadow thinks he's kidding. But we, the viewer, know, like, no, he's being serious, instead of this cryptic, like, it's Wednesday, it's my day. And you have to know that, like, Wednesday was named for, Wotan, and Thursday was named for Thor. Like that's, that's all these clever little in-joke kind of references.
Mhm.
But I think also in that time he could have said in a very serious way, no, we're going to this mystical place called the House on the Rock. I'm going to gather the other gods, and we are going to do whatever. Like they could have literally explained what was going to happen, and then we could have watched Shadow's disbelief.
Yeah,
as he has to figure out like that's
coming. No, that was in the book. That like if they're doing the book as loyally as they are, there's going to be a scene where that exact thing happens. It'll just be way too late. Like
right? No, exactly. Like I've already tuned out. So
and I think, but like real quick, like it's important to note this because I think in the flow of the book that happens early enough to where that's the appropriate place for that to happen, and they're just not honoring that sort of that. I don't want to use the word pacing. That's not really that. Well, that flow, like.
I used the word masturbatory last week, which is what I think they're doing is that they're just jerking off with like how cool they can make all these backstories and like side stories and stuff look and like that's great. But for a person like me who's not already into that, like I don't give a crap. Like I
am into that, and it's like I still don't like. You've got to serve the story first, and I feel like I'm getting shortchanged on both sides, right? I'm feeling like they're not. The show as just the show is not doing what it needs to as for that format, for that medium. It's just not working in the way it needs to. But then as a book fan, I'm seeing the book not given its full, taken to its full, what's the word? I'm losing words too now. Potential. Thank you. Good Lord. The book's not being taken to its full potential either. So it's almost like a double whammy for me where it's almost, I feel like if they had spent less time and money and effort on the really, just like trippy psychedelic stuff and had been a little bit more conservative, they probably could have shot a lot more. In terms of just actual footage, and we could probably get more of that book churned out. It's like I feel like you take House of Cards. House of Cards has no effects whatsoever. It's gorgeously shot, but they can do that. They can do a bunch of different footage and a bunch of like if you watch House of Cards and it feels like, or Sherlock's a better example. Like you watch. A 90-minute episode of Sherlock, and you feel every damn 90 minutes of that thing because it's just packed with stuff. And I feel like American Gods will get into a space or get into a room, or maybe 2 or 3 rooms and just hang out there and like show you how cool it is and like like do some kind of trippy overlay or something. It's like that's fine, but what else could we be doing with this time and these resources? Like what else could there be?
Right, and I think one of the things that makes Game of Thrones succeed is for a couple seasons there was enough magic, and through the form of effects that we were like intrigued and wanted to see more. Everything about it made us want to see more. Mm-hmm. And what's been so satisfying about last season was, and it's kind of shameful that it took them that long, but it did, they really felt like they were paying stuff off last season.
Yeah.
They were finally free of the constraints of the book, and they were shortcutting all over the place to get the story told. And there was a destination, and it was all coming, true for us. I love the way American Gods looks.
Yeah.
But I don't know what the story is. And it would be so much better. I think you pointed this out. If they shot some of it in just like super realistic terms, and then something mysterious happens and you have to sit there and question like or at least you have to anticipate, when am I going to see more of that cool stuff? Whereas, unfortunately, like I'm in this position of like, great, it's all cool. What's going on? I don't care, or I just don't know what's real. Yeah. And that's kind of worse because it's just getting me lost in the story. So I had one like real specific thing that I've noticed in a few episodes and finally like nailed it down in this episode, which was there's something about the sound effects that they use that. So for example, in this episode, we see this long flashback of Laura and Shadow's relationship, like how they met and, how everything like, and they don't even, dude, I was so frustrated that they didn't show the robbery go awry.
I know, right?
That was so aggravating. Like if you're going to spend all this prologue on setting like they could have just done the whole episode that was a prologue to they could have ended the episode with him getting arrested, and I would have been like, got it, I'm there with you.
Yep.
What a weird place to shortcut. So anyway, they do this prologue, and the IO9 recap did a great job of like pointing out the symbolism of like it starts and we see all this Egyptian symbolism, and you sort of think like, wait a second, are we back to the Egyptian gods or what? And then you realize like, no, Laura works in a casino that's like pyramid themed, and Egyptian themed. And that was kind of cool. And it's the color, the warmth of the film doesn't look more realistic, but it's pretty grounded. Like, it's all casino stuff. There's, a lot of good shots of the hands, like when Shadow tries to palm like the chips, and then she catches him as she's dealing. And like, I liked all that stuff. That was very cool. Then they as that flashback progresses to where she has died and she's been resurrected, and she sees him as he's been lynched and kills all the droogs of Technical Kid. In that moment, there are no Foley effects of her beating up those guys. It's all like a soundtrack.
Yeah.
And so in this moment of like super unrealism,
yeah,
if that's a word, like super fantasy, you don't even hear like the sounds of this battle that she's in.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like they take you out of the reality of that whole story again.
It's like they just want to do a music video that has like it's like the slow rain.
No, you're exactly right. That's like, totally what the impulse is. Slow it down. Yeah,
like the slow mo and stuff. And it's like, do we need? You're right. That would have. It's like they're focusing all the production elements. Like it's almost. I don't even want to. I don't even know what the word is.
The bathroom, like shitting out the embalming fluid. It's like super realistic and gross with all these sound effects. But the effect is that. I don't know. It's almost like backwards to me. For some reason. Like I don't. Yeah.
Do you know what I really wanted to? Do you know what I would have loved to have seen? And again, this is purely subjective. I understand that, but I wanted the production team of Breaking Bad to do this show. It needed to have that sort of level of realism to where you're like, where it's not so fantastical, where it's like, blood, like blood from the movie 300, like coming at the screen in really artistic drops is like the rainfall. You're like, I just don't think that's not the spirit of the book. The spirit of the book is America is a sort of very realistic, dingy place. And these gods that that the immigrants brought with them that they once believed in, they don't believe in anymore, and they're just kind of hoofing along with the rest of us, and all these shiny new things now have taken their place. And it's like that's where you focus that hyper fantastical stuff is on the new gods. Like you give that to them, you show how sort of down and dour and sort of just like down with the rest of us the old gods are. Like there's a cool visual way to do that I think is more appropriate. And what they clearly made a very bold, specific choice, and they're sticking to it. So well on them for that. But I don't think that was the right one in this case.
Yeah, it's man, I don't even know where to begin there. I love your idea. I love your idea of the Breaking Bad, production on this. What else jumps to mind immediately with like all the blood splatter and stuff is if we had Robert Rodriguez doing From Dusk Till Dawn, telling the American God story in that style of that was, that movie is like an hour or more of it is just a gangster, like realist gangster film.
Wow. What a great comparison.
When it turns into like a vampire movie, you're like, what the fuck? I mean, that was like groundbreaking when I first saw it,
it's funny you mentioned that because like I really dug the first half of it until they get to the bar, and then it's like, oh, okay. And what it turned into was fine, but it's just like I was really buying into what I had seen up to that point. So when it turned that drastically, it's like, well, I'm not as into this. I want to see more of that other thing. That's I want to see Quentin Tarantino being a complete creep. Yeah, like that was that was frightening.
Yeah, but even Game of Thrones. I mean, again, like the thing that keeps me in the moment of Game of Thrones is that crazy stuff will happen, but it all happens in a very grounded reality. And when there's a big battle, you're hearing people breathing hard. You're hearing
Yep.
swords banging off armor. You're hearing the sounds of like the horses thundering around. It's like all super visceral. And American Gods, it's like when you get to a really visceral part, they pull you out of it by getting rid of the sound. And then,
Do you know what it is? It feels like the whole thing is shot on a sound stage.
yeah,
Minus the driving scenes. Like it feels like they're in a studio somewhere indoors for like most of the stuff. Like that whole cemetery felt fake. You know, all of it. None of it felt real. It's like they had like,
dude. Yeah, that's the cemetery is an excellent point on that.
and it's like, why couldn't that have been like, imagine how much more into the story you would have been if that was a real location. You know, it's like, and watch, and somebody's like, well, it is. And somebody could easily say, tomorrow, like, oh, that was, that is a real place. But they stylized it so much, it lost any of that. Like they could have just done it on a set if that was the case. Because
when we were watching the first episode, when it gets to the cemetery, I literally was doing that thing where I'm like looking for the edges of the stage or something.
Right.
Because I didn't have a sense of the place. Like I was like, wait, I don't get it. Are they really outside, or is that like where is this like a fake grass, or what's going on? Yeah.
I think there's So we can go on and on. I think we've sort of, this is a trend that started last episode that we're seeing continue, where it's just like, I don't know where this show is going, and I worry a little bit. And it clearly they're not gonna get the whole book done this season. I mean, obviously, there's no, even if they were to attempt to, it'd be the most insane thing that would they'd have to cut so much. There's just no way.
So what are we going to do about it?
I don't know. Well, we were talking before we start, off air, about just rolling this back into the Todd and Taylor show feed, I guess, and calling it a interesting but short-lived experiment, if you will, on being excited for a show and sort of seeing it drift away from you.
Well, there's definitely some great podcasting lessons there. I was thinking more, specifically, one of the things that came up last week was I said that I realized, I do like the look of it, and there's some shows that can be slow and draw you in. I don't like the week to week of American Gods. I guess that's the shortest way to say that. So I do think I think where we're both leaning is we're going to put a pin in this, not do a weekly podcast on American Gods. And maybe at the end of the season, we both go back and binge, where we've left off. I, for one, was subscribing through the Stars app. So I just feel like, hey, I'm just going to cancel that. And then I'll pay for 1 month down the road and watch them all at once. And feel okay about it. But
I think it might enhance our enjoyment overall. I think, it's like we said last week too, this show seems to be one that is made for a single binge, and we're sort of forced watching it week to week, which may not fit the intent or the format. Maybe we appreciate it more when we can sort of look ahead and maybe fast forward through a few things and just stay on maybe.
I mean, I love this comparison to, Lost, which absolutely had a week to week, anticipation. Game of Thrones has that week to week anticipation. Both of us have at different times binged Game of Thrones seasons, I believe. So, that's kind of how we got into it. And so it's, that works both ways. I don't know that I've never binged Lost. I don't know if that,
I don't think you can
in that model, but this definitely feels like a show where it's not working week to week, but it might just work better as a binge. So,
So we should maybe I guess we'll see everybody after the binge.
That'd be good.
In a couple weeks.
And we still make Todd and Taylor shows. We still make separate podcasts. So there are plenty of places to find us.
Indeed. You can go to there.network, www.there.network. You can find us on soundcloud.com/there network, on Stitcher. Just look for any of our shows, search them by name, on iTunes, on Pocket Casts, and of course on Todd's favorite, Google Play.
Yeah, I'm like the only Android podcast subscriber. But
honestly, they need somebody to test it out for them.
Google Play's podcasts are awesome. They're so good. I love that format. where can people find you online if they want to chat with you and tell you that you're totally wrong about American Gods?
Yeah, you can yell at me at Taylor Trask on Twitter, TaylorTrask. Where can they find you?
I am at Hey Todd A on Twitter, and that's where you can yell at me because I have not read the book, and I'm giving up on the show after 4 episodes.
Oh, we're not giving up.
We'll come back together. We'll binge the last 4 episodes. We'll come back together and talk about it, and definitely look for the Todd and Taylor Show wherever fine podcasts are listened to.
That's right.
Cool. Thanks, Taylor.
Thanks, Todd. Bye-bye.